Welcome to our webinar, and also just to remind you that there has been a survey that was posted or sent out prior to this webinar starting, and some questions were asked in that which have been included in this webinar as well. So just a reminder that if you have any other questions, we're really happy to answer those, and if we aren't able to answer them as part of this webinar, then we will be able to include information about those questions in the recording, which will be made available after this webinar has been completed. So yes, today's webinar is about water safety planning, and in the ADRA network, water safety planning isn't particularly widely utilised, so a lot of this webinar will be suited to people who haven't necessarily had prior experience with carrying out or conducting water safety planning in their projects. So don't be afraid if you've not had much experience with water safety planning. This webinar will be able to meet some of the questions and queries that you might have. So what is a water safety plan? The water safety plan is a plan which systematically assesses risks at all stages of the water supply, right from the source through to the consumption. And you can see the little infographic there, which just shows the various stages of a water system, from the catchment, including treatment, if any, distribution, household storage, and also to the point of use. And at each of those stages, there are a range of various risks which can threaten the water system and the water supply, and can threaten the delivery of safe drinking water to the end consumer. And it's those risks that the water safety plan intends to address and manage and mitigate. So what is a water safety plan? The water safety plan aims to protect water quality before the problems occur. So it's a proactive rather than a reactive tool, and it clearly identifies action points for improvements as a result of completing the water safety plan. Water safety plans regularly monitor those control measures to make sure that the issues that may have been identified as part of the water safety planning are actually being monitored and maintained and managed. The water safety plan document isn't the end. It's actually the beginning of a dedicated implementation of the dedicated implementation of the water safety plan is the key. So putting together a water safety plan highlights the risks in a system, but the actual conducting ongoing maintenance or addressing the risks which have been highlighted as part of the plan are actually the key to water safety planning. A water safety plan also ensures that there is a consistent supply of drinking water. So often it's easy to set up a water system so that it is running when it is new, or running at a certain season or at a certain time, and maybe testing is conducted during a particular phase of a water supply system, either planning or design or implementation. But the water safety plan is there to make sure that throughout the year or throughout various seasons that there is a consistent supply of safe drinking water. So why use water safety plans? The Sustainable Development Goals include Sustainable Development Goal 6, which specifically relates to the availability of water and sanitation for all. And there is a specific priority indicator which refers to water which is safely managed for the end consumer, and water safety plans specifically addresses those indicators relating to water supplies which are safely managed in a practical manner. And according to the World Health Organization, water safety plans are the most effective approach to securing water quality because they are an approach which is not just focusing on a specific point, as in location of the water system or at a specific time of the water system. It actually is looking at a holistic approach to managing and securing water quality. The water system safety plan methodology is not only applicable for larger, maybe municipally owned and operated water systems, they actually are also appropriate for smaller community owned and operated systems as well, because they can be adaptable, as we will see through this webinar, and the complexity of the water safety plan can be adjusted to make it appropriate to the size and level of complexity within the actual water system. It's becoming more and more common for donors to actually require water safety plans as part of their funding mechanisms. And this is in line with an increased expectation for more professionally operated and managed water systems, which have a higher focus on the ongoing operation and maintenance to ensure that they are more sustainable and that they are more efficiently creating a safe water supply for communities. Water safety plans are also recognised as the most reliable and effective way to manage drinking water supplies, because they are looking more holistically at a longer time frame of water system management. So there are several benefits for water safety plans, and given that it's been a number of years now since water safety plans were first promoted by the WHO, there has been some newer, more recent studies which actually have assessed the benefits over a longer time frame of communities which have implemented water safety planning. And in 2017, the WHO put together a study in 51 different countries to outline some of the benefits for conducting and managing water safety plans. And you can see here, this graph here shows us the different ways in which water safety plans are benefiting communities, and also the number of different respondent countries which actually have indicated that a particular benefit has been applicable in their situation. So we can see that the top two benefits, improved system management and increased awareness, knowledge and understanding among staff, has been found to be of benefit to 84% of the respondent countries. And also interesting to see that there is an increased promotion and knowledge sharing. So water safety plan actually encourages and promotes the sharing of knowledge about the water system amongst key stakeholders. And that the next two indicators are around communication and sharing of the components of the water safety plan with various stakeholders. Unsurprisingly, water safety plans are also credited with helping to improve water quality and to ensure that water systems are complying with regulations in the various countries in which those water systems are operating. Other studies also promote the benefits of water safety plans. So this study here was actually undertaken in 2018. It's actually a journal article which has only been published a few months ago, called the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. And they did a study of various water safety plans in the Asia Pacific region, and came up with a list of outcomes and impacts that showed the impact of conducting water safety planning. And I was interested particularly in some of the improvements here. Now, one of the key things that this study showed is that water safety plans are a key tool which can be used by operators or implementers to demonstrate a need and to validify a need or a request for funding in support for additional improvements to that infrastructure. And here we can see that according to this research, 10 of the countries that were studied, which is 86% of them, demonstrated that they used one of the outcomes and impacts of having a water safety plan enabled them to be able to improve their infrastructure, and it also helped them to leverage their donor funding. So they were able to demonstrate particular gaps and needs in their water system, and then because of the robustness and the fact that data had been collected and that they were able to demonstrate exactly where risky components of their water system are, they were able to then put that to donors and to be able to leverage infrastructure improvements as a result of doing that. Interesting to note also here that water safety planning has been associated with an increased water quality testing, and I'll come back to that in a minute as well further on in this presentation. So there are some limitations. Traditionally, many water systems have relied purely on water quality testing to determine whether a source perhaps or a water system is a good quality source or a good quality system. However, there are some limitations relying purely on that. And that isn't to say that there isn't a place for water testing, but there are some limitations to that. And many of the systems which ADRA officers are working on are quite remote, particularly in the Pacific, where there are small island nations. And even in countries where ADRA is working and doing WASH projects, those projects tend to be in areas which are nowhere near a lab, and so it's difficult and costly to get samples from a field site, either a source or a tap or wherever those samples may be collected from. It's difficult to get those samples from that site through to a lab in a timely manner without deterioration of that sample before the testing can be conducted. Even if you've got portable testing, it can be cumbersome to carry out that portable testing, and there also is a cost associated with that. It's not actually feasible to test all water, and naturally, unless you have online testing, which is quite high technology and also expensive, it's not feasible to be testing water very frequently. So commonly, water may be tested only a very few times throughout the life of a water system. And often that might be at the beginning when the water system is being, maybe the source is being selected or design work is being undertaken to implement that water system. Then there maybe some testing which is carried out, but often it isn't regular testing or routine testing. It's just undertaken at various times through some sort of grab sample. So the percentage of water consumed compared to the percentage of water tested is very high. So in other words, there's not much water that's tested compared to what's being consumed. The other thing is that test results can take time to be returned to the community or to the various stakeholders which are interested in seeing those test results. And even with field-based testing, and ADRA recently has become a lot more, has got a lot more involved in undertaking things like compartment bag tests or CBT tests, which are very portable, pretty low cost, pretty easy to do in the field. But even those really portable tests, if you're looking at a bacteriological test, then you're looking at the minimum 24 hours before you can have a test result, and in some cases up to 72 hours depending on the ambient temperature conditions to get a test result back. So water tests, even if they come back with a positive test for some sort of bacteriological contamination or some sort of contamination to a water system, they don't provide very much information on when that contamination may have occurred or why it may have occurred or whereabouts in the water system that contamination event has happened. So in terms of water safety planning, according to the WHO, there are 6 steps involved in putting together a water safety plan, and there are many resources to support putting together a water safety plan, and we're going to go through some of those resources as part of this webinar. But basically the WHO promotes a 6 task, or has 6 tasks or 6 steps, which are a way for us to actually put together a water safety plan. So the first task is to engage the community and assemble a water safety planning team. So these team members would be selected from a range of different stakeholders or community members. They may include health and water staff, or could include members from various other NGOs, perhaps even outside ADRA, who have experience in doing WASH projects or working with water systems. And they would also be expected to have, somebody on that team would be expected to have a good understanding of the community and the potential water system, and also the various government policies and standards and laws which are applicable in the location that the water system would be implemented. So the second task in putting together a water safety plan would be to actually describe the community water supply. And I know one of the questions which was asked in the pre-survey is, can you actually do a water safety plan when there is no water supply? And I would suggest that wherever there is a community, they would have to have some sort of water system. It may not be a piped system, it may not be a formalized system, but there will have to be some sort of, for basic survival, there would have to be some sort of water that community is accessing and utilizing in order to survive or exist as a community. So as long as there is some sort of system, even if it's a really rudimentary system or if it's a really basic system, there would be a basis for doing a water safety plan and looking at the risks and how to mitigate those risks just in the same manner that you would for a system which is perhaps more technically robust or is a larger system or perhaps has a piped network or anything like that. So describing the community water supply, whatever that may be, could include maps or photos or water quality records or anything that is associated with that system itself. So the third task for water safety planning would be to identify and assess the hazards and hazardous events, risks, and existing control measures for that community water supply. So in this step, you would be looking at how serious the risk is of a particular hazard actually causing harm to a community and how those risks are being addressed. In the fourth task, you would be developing and implementing an incremental or step-by-step improvement plan to enable the community to address and improve the risks associated with their water system. So they may be in this step scoping opportunities to improve their drinking water quality and perhaps prioritising actions to improve the management of the supply. So the fifth step, or task 5, would be to monitor control measures and verify the effectiveness of the water safety plan. So in this step, you're actually looking at how you are effectively measuring and monitoring the control measures to minimise the risks associated with that water system. So operational monitoring and inspections might be carried out in this stage to demonstrate whether or not those risks are actually being mitigated. So that brings us to the final step, or the final task, task 6, in implementing a water safety plan. And this, I think, is actually the most important step. It's a step that often gets left out in the interests of time and budget. But actually, this is a really crucial part of the water safety plan because it's the practical part of the water safety plan. This is the plan where those who are actively working on that water system, who are managing it, who are operating it, and who are responsible for delivering safe water to the community, this is the part that actually tells them whether what they are doing is on track and gives them guidance for how they can improve and review what they are doing over a period of time as the situation changes and as time moves on and as the system will slightly or may significantly change over a period of time. So I'd like to actually move us on to an actual water safety plan example. And although there aren't too many country officers, ADRA country officers, that are actively undertaking water safety plans, there are water safety plans which have been done in Vanuatu in the South Pacific. So there's a little map there just to show you where Vanuatu is. It's one of the Pacific Island nations in the South Pacific Ocean, somewhere to the northwest of New Zealand and to the northeast of Australia. And this is part of a project which started in 2016, I think the beginning of 2016, and had about 15 different water systems located in various communities. And ADRA Vanuatu actually undertook water safety plans for each of those communities at the beginning of the project. So I'm just going to pause my screen so that I can actually take you through the water safety plan which was undertaken by ADRA Vanuatu at that stage. So I'm actually going to scroll through the Word document that was undertaken or put together by ADRA Vanuatu, just so that you can have an example of a water safety plan that has been undertaken. Now you will notice that the steps that they've chosen to take for this water safety plan are slightly different than the WHO steps that I've outlined. And this demonstrates that the water safety planning documents or templates that we are going to look at in this webinar are not a one-size-fits-all. There is an expectation, I guess, or an understanding that these water safety plans can easily be contextualized to suit your local context and maybe even to suit the requirements of your local water authorities or government departments which are responsible for overseeing water systems. And certainly in Vanuatu, the water department there has taken some steps to adjust and modify templates that are specific for the context in Vanuatu, which we'll be sharing as part of this webinar. But for now, we're just going to run through this document, and this document will also be available on ADRA's eNet. That we will also send out a link so that you can access this and have a look in your own time, going through to see if there might be some points in this document which could be useful and applicable in your specific context in whatever country you are working in. So this particular water safety plan is relating to a village called Tangoa Village, which is on a little island just to the south of Santo Island in Vanuatu. So we can see here that the document was completed in May of 2016. It hasn't, to my knowledge, been reviewed since that date. It could be reviewed at any time. In New Zealand, our government also has regulations for water systems, and it's actually a compulsory requirement here in New Zealand for water systems to have a water safety plan. And we do also have a requirement that they are revised every 2 years. I know that's not the requirement in Vanuatu, but I think it is a good rule of thumb that they are required every 2 years or so, or if there is some major change which has occurred either in the system or perhaps with some of the management of that water system. So here we can see that regarding the water safety plan, we've got some key contacts here within the community, including mobile phones so that we can actually contact them if we've got additional questions later on. We've got a location of the system, the type of source, a spring water and a surface water through the running stream. We can see here that there isn't actually any treatment associated with this water system, that it actually is a water system which is supplied directly to the community. We can also see here that there is some information here on various types of toilets which are available to the community, and also the total number of households. So it's not a particularly huge system, but in the Vanuatu context, it's probably reasonably typical. So here's some information on the actual island itself, and also history about where the water has been collected or where the community has accessed their water from in the past. Here also is some information on the Water Committee, which was established or re-established as a result of the project that ADRA did there. And so we've got the various committee members as well as what position they hold on the Water Committee, and as many phone numbers as is possible. Not every person will have a phone number, but where we've got phone numbers, it's good to get information on how we can contact these people. So you'll remember back in our various tasks that we just talked about. We talked about having a description of the existing water system. So this community had a water system which was constructed at some time a number of years back, and so they've described that system here, and you can see that they're actually also pointing out some of the potential risks associated with this particular water system. So here in the first instance, we've got the catchment and the intake, and there's a couple of photographs here which show exactly what that's like, and photographs are great because they provide a really good visual description of what's actually happening. This next stage is of whether there would be any treatment. If you had any treatment in your system, you could discuss the details of it in the section. Of course, in Tangoa, they don't have any treatment, so that's not applicable. But what we've got is some storage and distribution. So there's a steel tank. Obviously, the roof has rusted away. There's an inlet pipe which has been retrofitted at some stage to that tank through the hole in the roof. And of course, because there's light that's getting into that tank, there's some sort of algae on the top of the water as well. So this here is a sketch which has been put together by the community or the water committee in conjunction with the community, and it actually shows key components of the water system. The sketch shows where the sources are, where the storage tanks are, and you can see that there's a storage tank here, there's another one here, there's two sources here, there's two streams, and so we can see where the key components of this water system are, including houses or churches, which may be areas obviously where the points of demand are going to be. So it gives us a good spatial understanding and awareness of the system in Tangoa. They've also got a pipe that goes underwater, that crosses through a saltwater environment to supply water from the mainland to a portion of the settlement which is located on the island just offshore. It's not a particularly long pipe, but it does actually supply water to this community which is residing on that small island. And then in the next component of this water safety plan, they've got the catchment and intake, and they're just listing all the things that may happen at various locations within the water system. So at the catchment and intake section, they've got a list of things here which may actually cause the drinking water to become unsafe, and they've made a decision as to whether they think this is under control or not. And also they've made a decision on which of these items need some sort of urgent attention. And that is then further addressed down in the water safety plan. So here's a similar study which has been undertaken on the storage and distribution component of the water system. So again, there's a list of potential items that may cause the drinking water to become unsafe, and then also some sort of assessment as to whether urgent attention is required. And you can see that they've considered that there's a lot of urgent attention required on the system. And so then the next step that has been undertaken is to put together an action plan to manage those items which need urgent attention. So again, it's been split up into several components, the catchment and intake. So what they've got here is what remedies would be needed in order to address the issues which have been highlighted above. And then similarly for the storage and distribution component of the system, they've undertaken the same sort of assessment to provide information on what actually needs to be done to rectify some of the issues that have been addressed above. And then finally there is a another table which has been put together to allocate responsibilities, timeframes and costs for putting together the improvement schedule associated with this water system. So again, we've got the catchment and intake. It's been separated out from catchment and intake. And also, I think there's also they've just got the catchment and intake there. There may have also been a storage component to this table, and I may not have just included it in this document here. And then you can see here that there's a cost associated with that. So that's about a $7,500 US budget. That's in Vanuatu Vatu. And then here we've actually got a picture of the people who are associated with this water system. So there you've got it as a real life example of a water safety plan which has been utilised in Vanuatu. And what I'm actually now going to show you is some templates which could be useful for you as you are working on your water safety plans in your particular context. So this template is actually has been made available by the WHO, and it actually just goes through and outlines another methodology, or the same methodology that I was discussing when I talked about the 6 tasks. But this is actually the water safety plan that could be put together in association with that. So I think here we can see that we've got space there to put the name of the water supply system. There's a prompt there for the date when it was updated, as well as the version number, which is really important for being able to control the version of the water safety plan. And then here we've got a pretty basic contents list. Now I've actually shortened this template for the purposes of this webinar, but the original template was 32 pages long, and I've just condensed it down because a lot of that is actually tables to fill out. So there's not huge amounts of text which are required. A lot of it is tables or diagrams or things that make it a lot easier to put together the water safety plan. So here we can see an overview of the water safety plan steps, which are the same steps that we talked about earlier in this webinar, the 6 steps that we talked about. And then here, this is pretty similar to what we saw in Vanuatu as well, where we've got the water safety plan team or the water committee team. And then here we've actually got a list of, the template helps us by providing a list of duties that the water safety plan team would be responsible for undertaking as part of the work that they are doing to put together the water safety plan. And of course, contextualize it for your own situation and add or delete responsibilities as required or as they are not required. So I've actually just very quickly populated our water safety plan team with some of the names that we had there in Vanuatu, just to show that we want to see who they are, what their role would be. Perhaps if there's more than one organisation that they are belonging to, we could put that information in that column there, and then to outline what their role would be in the water safety plan team, as well as their contact information. And then here we've got the various water system descriptions. So this again is a table, like I mentioned before, where it's divided into the various components of the water system. So we've got the catchment and the source, treatment if there is any, the storage, distribution and collection component, and also the point of use or household stage of our water system. So here I've just also very quickly, you'll recognise that photo from our Vanuatu example, where we've just taken that information and just put it into a different format. Again, there's no specific requirement to have it in one format or another. This just gives you another option to utilise for your specific context. So we've got information on the catchment here in this column, and then we've got information on the treatment, but there isn't actually any treatment for tangoa, but we do have some information on the storage and distribution and collection. So we've got the old steel tank there, and then also we could put in some information here about how that community uses the water at its point of use. So you could even in this column here include information on, it could be dipping tools, or it could be household storage containers, or it could be tap stands or standpipes. Could go into that column there. And in here you could also have a map of the water system. So here again we've got our map of the tangoa system, which we would include in there. And then we would move on to step 3, which actually looks at the hazard and control measures and the risk assessment and prioritisation for our systems here. So we can then rank them from very important to important or less than important, so that we can then understand which areas need more attention and maybe which ones don't quite need so much attention. Here we can actually look at the various things of what could go wrong. We can obviously expand that sheet for whatever is required. We may include information at the catchment, or treatment, or storage, or point of use. And then here again we can actually look at those areas which have a high priority and focus on those, looking at what improvements are needed, who would be responsible, what sort of costs, where the money would come from, and also the time frame for starting and finishing, as well as a status, so that we can understand how far through we are. And then again, looking at a monitoring plan, the 5th step of the water safety plan, that we can actually look at what actions are required for ongoing monitoring. And again, that's separated out into the various stages of the water system. So whether that be at the intake, or reticulation, or storage, wherever that might be. We could also look at what water quality testing may be required and how often that should be, and also what sort of sanitary inspections might be required. So if there's any sort of sanitation systems, then they may have a direct impact depending on their location and type of sanitary system. They may have a direct impact on our water quality, particularly if they are in close proximity to our water source. And then our water safety plan implementation itself needs to be updated and maybe even audited on a particular time frame. So, and of course we want to know and understand what sort of satisfaction our users have with the systems that we are implementing, because of course that's why we're doing that. And then that leads us on to the 6th and final step of our water safety plan, to actually document and manage the actual plan itself, to have some tools and data that's available for our users, and so that they can actually understand what needs to be done and when, and also giving them an opportunity for review and improvement. So there's a couple of templates there, and within the template itself, just to actually help identify what specific activities would be carried out when it comes to reviewing the water safety plan, and how often and who would be responsible for this, including the review and revision meetings for the actual water safety plan document itself. So the next document that I want to just draw your attention to is another template. This one also has been put together by the WHO, and it's a guide for participants as water safety plans are put together. So you'll see some similarities in the, actually this one was put together by the Water Department in Vanuatu, apologies, not the WHO. This one has actually been put together by Vanuatu's Water Department. But they have, you can see that they have, there are definitely some similarities between this document and the WHO document. So they're still collecting information on the systems. They've outlined the same 6 steps that are included in the water safety planning information provided by the WHO. So again, we've got information on the team. We've got a description of the current supply, including the waste system, sanitary system, looking at maybe maps for water and waste, and also a flow diagram, maybe if there's interactions between the water systems and the waste system, that would be important to go in there. And then here we've got a description of the performance. So this is actually like a checklist that would be really useful if somebody particularly is doing site investigations, and these sorts of questions could even be uploaded onto Kobo Collect for those officers which are using smartphones to do data collection in communities, as a very efficient way to collect and analyse data for the water systems. Just pause that share again. I'll come back to my PowerPoint presentation. So I just want to move on to a series of resources which are available and online. These resources are available from a range of different authors and publications, and what we've got here is this is a water safety plan manual which has been put together by the WHO. Here is the URL which when you get access to this document, you can click on that and get access to the English version of the Water Safety Plan Manual, recognising that it's actually available in a number of different languages, as are most of the WHO documents that are available for water safety planning. This is another one specifically for small water supplies, again by the WHO. It's available in multiple different languages again, and this is the URL for that document. This water safety plan is a field guide which includes templates and tools, including the template that I've just shown you in this webinar for the development of water safety plans for small communities. So again, here is the link that will take you straight to that document. And then this document is quite a handy little document. It's not as comprehensive as the WHO documents. It's been put together by Tier Fund. It's a shorter document. It has a slightly different methodology, but it's actually quite a nice little document just to outline the steps that you can undertake without quite so much reading that you might have to do for reading through some of the WHO documents that I've just talked about above. I also just wanted to go through with you, and I'll show you something called a water safety portal. Now this has been put together by the WHO, and I'm going to take you through to the actual website. This is the URL, to go through to the WSP portal, or the Water Safety Portal, which has some really good resources on it for those who are putting together water safety plans. Okay, so what we can see here is the home page. I'll take you through to the home page for the Water Safety Portal. So when you actually log in or go to the Water Safety Portal, this will be the front page that you will see. So there's actually two main sections to it. One of them is about what are water safety plans. So you can actually click in here and you can see an outline of what would be involved in water safety planning. So this webinar focuses on small water supplies, but there is also, for those who might want to branch out into an urban context, there's also a lot of resources and information available on this website for urban water safety planning. So if we click on the small water supplies, we can see that here again are the 6 steps. And if we scroll down, we can actually see what is required, or some extra guidance to help us move through each of those 6 tasks. And if I can't go back to the home page, and then I can go into this resources section is really handy. It's got so many things in there which will be helpful. So there are various resources here. You can do a keyword search for the particular topic that you might specifically be interested in. I'm just going to take you through to the water safety plan template. So there's key water resources. That's a really handy document tab to click on, and it will take you through to a whole range of documents here. And you can see actually that a lot of these are real examples of what has been put together in various countries. So there's some there from Nepal, there's some from South America, various countries in South America. If you scroll through, there are some there from various Asian countries as well, which may or may not be applicable to you. So you can just go through, find something that is most representative of your context. So here's something here for Tanzania, which you can still use and then maybe adjust for your own context. So here's a water safety plan template. If we click on that, we can download or preview the resource. You can preview it if you don't want to download it. And then that just provides a bit more information on what it is. And if you download it, I am pretty sure that this one is a Word document. So yeah, you can download that. You can see that in the bottom left of my screen there, that if I click on that, it's going to open up a Word document, which you can then easily modify and adjust to suit your specific context. Let's wait for Word to open that up. It's taking a couple of seconds there. And there you go. That looks familiar because we talked about it earlier in our webinar. You're already familiar with the format of that because we've talked about that. So I'm just going to close that down. And then bring you back to the PowerPoint presentation that I had. Okay, so what are some of the challenges? This is our final slide. What are some of the challenges and opportunities associated with water safety planning? So one of the challenges is that once water safety plans are completed, they're often not reviewed or revisited. And this is just a reality, I think, of time and budget, like I mentioned earlier. But I think there's also an opportunity here that that we can address that. Another challenge with water safety plans is that, particularly historically, that financial barriers, either real or perceived, are hurdles to water safety planning, and also revisiting them as well and reviewing them. When it comes to opportunities, the reality is that when we don't revisit water safety plans, it does actually limit their ability to assist with the ongoing operation of how to safely and consistently deliver safe water to the end user, because one of the key strengths of a water safety plan is that it is something that gives us a tool that can be used over a long period of time, not just a very limited period of time. When it comes to financial barriers, water safety planning actually doesn't have to result in a significant cost. And the reason for this is that many water safety planning elements are actually already practiced as a matter of course. So when you've got people who are getting the systems up and running or back up and running, perhaps after something has caused a disruption in supply, those elements or those activities are actually part of the water safety plan. The water safety plans actually help to systematize existing good practice and help to fill gaps. So they can help to prioritize and focus resources, perhaps limited resources that a community has, so that they're getting the best bang for their buck or best value for money out of the resources that they do have. So it actually helps from a financial perspective for communities to best utilise the funds that they've got. Small amounts of investments in water safety plans can result in significant cost savings through operation and maintenance of the water systems. And as I mentioned earlier, water safety plans can help validate requests for financial support. So they provide a robust and confidence-inspiring opportunity for communities or, say, ADRA to then approach particular donors and say, hey, look, this is our need, this is what we need, and here is why we realise and recognise that this is a need. So that brings me to the end of the formal part of the webinar, and enables us to ask or answer questions that you as listeners might have. And so I just want to open it up to you to ask if anybody has any questions and or comments or queries associated with this webinar.
Thank you so much, Victoria. This was really interesting, and I know it's been very helpful to all of us on the line, especially since so few of our ADRA offices are really implementing water safety plans. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone so that you have a chance to ask a question, and if you don't want to voice your question, please add it in the chat box and I can read it off.
Emily, is there a way that I can see who the participants are so that I know who's asking the question? Somebody asks a
Could you repeat that, Victoria? You were sort of going in and out.
Oh, I just wanted to know how I can tell who's asking the question.
We do have a list of participants, and we can tell who's asking the questions. So if you do have a question, please tell us who you are, what office you're from, what role you have in the office, so that we know who it is that's asking our question. To get us started with questions, I have one. What kind of cultural barriers have you encountered, Victoria, when trying to implement a water safety plan? I know you've mentioned a lot about the financial barriers that might exist, but what kind of cultural barriers have you run into?
Actually, it's interesting actually with that discussion. I know that I had a discussion, maybe not so much a cultural barrier, but an institutional barrier. The water department actually in Vanuatu, where they said to me, why would you do a water safety plan that doesn't have a water system? And I said, well, if you've got a community, they're going to have a water source or some water supply somewhere. Otherwise, what are they drinking? How are they existing? And for them, their mindset at that stage, and I can say that it's definitely changed now in Vanuatu, but their mindset at that stage, that the safety plan was more for urban context, it was more for systems that had, treatment and municipal tanks and big pipes and things like that, and they didn't really see that as being relevant for community. It's nice to see that has changed a lot in Vanuatu. There's recognition that water safety planning is very much applicable to small communities. When it comes to cultural challenges, I think that there is one of the big cultural challenges is with regards to ongoing operation and maintenance of systems, where in places where operation and maintenance is not of high priority in communities, then the idea of doing a plan that you can utilize to proactively address operating and maintenance issues rather than reactively responding to issues as they arise is a challenge. And I think that many of our country offices would have similar challenges in that regard. So, and perhaps this is one of the reasons why they're often not reviewed or revisited. But there is more and more emphasis by governments and by water departments or water authorities to make sure that when NGOs such as ADRA are implementing water systems, that our level of professionalism increases and that we are seen to be doing a really thorough, robust job, that we need to make sure that if we want to do this work, this sort of wash work, that we need to do it properly and professionally. And that includes doing things that we perhaps haven't done historically or traditionally, including making sure that there is some sort of scope for communities to really address ongoing issues associated with water systems.
Right, and I suppose that's the whole point of getting the community to be involved, as you've said, that will sort of help them with the prioritization of it all. Anyone else? Do you have any questions?
Victoria, this is Jason, joining you from Madagascar today, and I was interested in the point you made that some water safety planning in the surveys that were done by WHO resulted in actual funding of repairs and different projects. I've heard of that happening. Can you maybe give a little explanation of how it is that having a written plan might lead to the possibility of a community receiving funding?
Yeah, that's a really good question or observation. And I think I can answer that by saying that what we're trying to do is we're trying to be a star that shines a bit brighter than other stars. And certainly from funders' perspectives, often they will get so many applications for funding from communities or maybe even NGOs or you know, for systems, but the data that backs up the request for funding is so limited and so lacking in detail that it's really hard to make a choice as to which systems you would actually want to fund if you're looking at it from a donor perspective. So if we as an organisation, like ADRA as an organisation, is able to provide good quality data that inspires confidence that it's robust and that it's been obtained systematically and methodically, and that there's been you know, a good level of scrutiny within the community or with the assistance of ADRA, if we are able to actually provide that level of confidence to donors, then it just makes their job so much easier when it comes to choosing potential projects to support. So, you know, whether that donor is an in-country government donor or whether it's an international donor or whether it's a corporate that is looking at supporting in their own neighbourhood or whatever, if they've actually got robust, reliable data that they have confidence in, then they are much more willing to provide support to that particular community. So it's really, I guess in a way, it's upping our game so that we can provide information which I just know from experience is missing in so many applications for from communities for funding.
It seems like in that case, it would almost be a form of assessment that you're keeping on file in case of need.
Sort of, yes, that's true, but it's also often once a donor has provided some level of support to a community, there may be the option for subsequent stages. And so if there is, you know, if we're able to robustly say, hey, look, this is what we've done, these are some really justified next steps or next stages, or this is what we can do to make it even better, then often a donor may well be looking for ways to allocate ongoing budget to a particular project as well.
Okay, we have about 10 more minutes if there are any others who might have a question. All right. If not, we will have this recording available. So, and we will be sending out an email about that once the recording is ready. We will also, in that same email, have a post-webinar survey that we would appreciate if you could take a few minutes to fill out, because it really helps us in putting together relevant future webinars for everyone. In that email, we can include some of these resources that Victoria has shared with us today. I know those might be very helpful to some of us. And lastly, we also have the Health Technical Learning Lab has an email address in case you might have any questions later on about this topic. That email address is healthtll@adra.org. So feel free to send some questions on through there. If that is all the questions right now from everyone, we can go ahead and wrap this up. And thank you, Victoria, so much for sharing today.
Thanks, everyone, and thank you very much, Emily, for hosting as well.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.